social animals that can't live alone.
The birth of the printing press. Around 970 to 1051 AD, many do not know the birth of the printing press actually began in Asia. The first movable type was created by Bai Xing. Later on, in 1297, Wang Shen brought the idea of the wood type, creating a revolving table, which led to faster printing speeds. As time increased and people learned how to create more and be more innovative, Gutenberg created the first printing press in Europe. He replaced wood with metal plates. The first book Gutenberg created in his shop was the Bible, printing about 180 copies around the time of 1452. October 31st, 1517, Martin Luther created the 95th Thesis, which were a list of questions up for debate. He really put printing to the test. The first newspaper was produced and distributed in 1605. Newspaper is something that we even have today in our modern times. Printing has always been around and it impacts us massively. Printing is something that everyone does, from being a school teacher to working in an office to even being a student. Printing is always around. In 1877, the phonograph was created by Thomas Edison. The phonograph was a device that recorded sound by marks being played back over a tinfoil rotating cylinder. 1880, the improvements were made by Alexander Graham Bell. He started to use wax-coated cardboard cylinders instead. Later in 1890, Emil Berliner transitioned from cylinders to flat discs, also known as records. In 1908, double-sided recorded discs were the new and high demand. It was highly wanted by everyone because you could listen to both sides. The gramophone started to become the new name for the phonograph. In 1955, the first portable phonograph was designed, also known today as our DJ turntable.
An Edison standard phonograph from the collection of the Henry Ford, circa 1903, the earliest technology to playback recordings you could actually record at home. So I'm going to demonstrate now. Hello, hello, hello. Mary had a little lamb, its fleece was white as snow, and everywhere that Mary went, its lamb was sure to go. So now I can lift the cylinder up, remove it, and brush off the swarf because I cut through the wax. Switch out my cutting stylus for a playback stylus. Put it back on the machine, reposition, horn back, Let's see what we can hear.
Hello, hello, hello. Mary had a little lamb, and his streets were white as snow. And everywhere that Mary went, this lamb was sure to go.
Well, I'm going to be talking about the radio for a little bit. And basically it started in the 1920s, 1930s. And radio was used for communication, another form of communication. So one of the largest and most radioactive advertising agency in the United States during this period, it was around the 1920s, was the J. Walter Thompson Company. The story of his agency entry into broadcasting and its relationship to the dominant network at the time, NBC, provides a glimpse into machinations behind the stars and programs soon to become so familiar to the American public.
You know, that old dusty thing that sits up at the front of your car or in the corner of your house? Most of us are too occupied with television, our iPods, or video games to really listen to it. But the impact it has had on our world is immense. It all started in 1873 when James Clerk Maxwell showed mathematically that electromagnetic waves could travel through air. Before long, in 1888, Heinrich Hertz demonstrated Maxwell's theory by demonstrating that someone could produce and detect electromagnetic radiation. Then, in 1892, Nikola Tesla used Maxwell's mathematic findings to demonstrate the sending and receiving of radio frequency energy. He proposed that this method could be used for sending and receiving information. But it was Guglielmo Marconi who built the first wireless transmitter in 1896, which was capable of sending signals up to 1.5 miles. He then proceeded to develop the world's first transatlantic radio communication service between Clifton, Ireland, and Newfoundland in 1901. The next evolution in radio technology was the invention of the spark gap transmitter. This device allowed for the production of the first commercially available radio sets. But the spark gap radios were plagued with problems, mainly electrical interference. These were greatly improved with the invention and production of crystal radio sets. The crystal sets were the first widely produced and widely used radio sets in America. These crystal sets were widely used in most American homes by the 1920s. It was the American family's connection to the rest of the country. This was fantastic, but there was still a problem that needed to be fixed. Up to this time, all radio is being broadcast using AM waves. AM stands for amplitude modulation. But the problem was that AM radio is medium range and is prone to be blocked by urban structures. But in 1933, Edwin H. Armstrong invented FM radio. FM stands for frequency modulation. This type of broadcasting method uses a wavelength that is less prone to static and blockage. It also has a longer range. With the invention of FM, radio only needed one more evolution to become what you know today. That last advancement was the transistor radio. The transistor radio had particular advantages over the old crystal sets. The transistor sets were much cheaper than the crystal ones, used less power, had a smaller size, and had a very long lifespan.
The first actual television was invented in 1927 by a guy named Philo Farnsworth. TV started at 1948. By 1962, almost 100% of homes had a TV. At first, entertainment was to get people out of their homes. In fact, people would watch TVs in store windows and go to neighbors' houses. NBC and CBS migrated from radio to TV. Both companies had similar programming and regulations, network, and advertising. The World Wide Web was invented by Tim Berners-Lee and Robert Kelley. In 1989, they proposed a hypertext database for sharing information. In 1990, they created the basic web system and the browser. The reason the World Wide Web was invented because scientists were looking for a way to share their data. Web 2.0 celebrated the adoption of social technologies as a precursor to a better, freer society and framed the collection and sharing information as the bedrock of revolution. The political arm of Web 2.0 is focused on net neutrality, copyright reform, peer-to-peer advocacy, and government reform.
Of the history of the internet and why it matters for net neutrality. In 1969, researchers for DARPA sent the first data between computers in Los Angeles and Stanford over ARPANET, using a technology that would eventually evolve into the modern internet. 2 more computers are added to the network by the end of the year. By 1971, there are 15 different nodes across the US connected to the ARPANET. In 1972, electronic mail is introduced.
You've got mail.
The following year, the Transmission Control Protocol is created and establishes how information flows between computers. The first international connections to ARPANET are introduced in England and Norway. By the mid-1970s, other US government-based networks spring up in the Department of Energy, NASA, and CSNet, developed for the computer science community through funding from the National Science Foundation. Throughout the 80s, networks began independently popping up across the country. In 1989, Tim Berners-Lee invents the World Wide Web at the CERN Physics Laboratory in Switzerland, providing a standard for different networks of connected computers to interact. The internet goes public in 1990. The World, the first dial-up service provider to offer direct internet access to the general public, is launched in Brookline, Massachusetts. In 1993, the first search engine is launched, which makes the web searchable and limits the need for indexes. By 1994, there are 11 million Americans online.